They say that in any relationship, trust is the foundation. It's the bedrock you build everything on: the shared jokes, the future plans, the quiet moments on a Tuesday night that feel more important than any grand gesture. For 3 years, I thought the foundation I had with Claire Cruz was solid granite, unshakable. I was 29 years old, she was 28, and we were building a life. What I didn't know was that my foundation wasn't granite at all. It was sandstone, and a single lie was about to turn it all to dust. Our story started the way a lot of modern stories do, not with a dramatic movie moment, but with a quiet click. We met online, 2 profiles that just seemed to align. Her smile in her main picture wasn't one of those posed perfect influencer smiles. It was a little crooked, caught mid-laugh, and it felt real. Our first date was at a ridiculously loud coffee shop where we basically had to shout at each other for 2 hours, but it didn't matter. The connection was instant. She talked about her passion for landscape photography, and I talked about my obsession with building vintage computers. We were different, but our values seemed to line up perfectly. Honesty, ambition, the importance of family. Or so I thought. Those first few months were a blur of discovery. I learned that she hummed off-key when she was cooking, that she was terrified of spiders, but weirdly fascinated by sharks, and that she could quote nearly every line from her favorite cheesy 80s action movies. I fell for the small things first, the way she'd steal a French fry off my plate with this look of mock innocence, the way she'd leave little encouraging notes on my desk when I was stressed about a project at work. She just fit. She fit into the empty spaces in my life I didn't even know were there. Our relationship wasn't a whirlwind romance full of dramatic peaks and valleys. It was a slow, steady burn. It was comfortable. We built routines. Sunday mornings were for the farmer's market, followed by an afternoon of lazy binge watching. Wednesdays were our unofficial date nights, a promise we made to each other to break up the monotony of the work week, even if it just meant trying a new recipe at home. We met each other's families. My mom adored her. She called Claire the sunshine I needed, and for a long time, I believed it. Claire's family welcomed me with open arms, treating me like a son from our very first Christmas together. We were weaving our lives together, thread by thread, creating a tapestry that felt strong and secure. At 29, you start thinking differently about the future. It's not some abstract concept anymore. It's right there, knocking on your door. Most of our friends were getting married, buying houses, having kids. The conversations at dinner parties shifted from weekend plans to mortgage rates and school districts. And Claire and I were right there with them. We talked about it all. We'd drive through quiet suburban neighborhoods on weekends, pointing out houses we liked. She'd talk about wanting a big backyard for a dog, maybe a golden retriever. I'd talk about needing a garage with enough space for my projects. We even had a running joke about what we'd name our hypothetical kids, a debate that never got settled but was always fun to have. These weren't just idle daydreams. It felt like we were sketching out the blueprints for our life. It felt real, tangible, and inevitable. After 3 years, marriage wasn't a question of if, but when. I loved her. I truly deeply believed I was going to spend the rest of my life with this woman. I pictured her standing at the end of an aisle. I pictured us growing old together, sitting on a porch somewhere, still arguing about those cheesy 80s movies. The emotional investment was total. I was all in. But there's another side to me, one that has always coexisted with my heart. I'm a logical person. My brain is just wired that way. I'm an engineer by trade, and my entire career is built on a foundation of data evidence and verifiable facts. I don't operate on assumptions. I test hypotheses. I double-check the numbers. It's not that I'm a pessimist. I just believe in certainty. I'm the guy who will spend 3 weeks researching the pros and cons of different washing machines before I buy one. I'll read every consumer report, watch every video review, and create a spreadsheet comparing specs and warranties. My friends think it's overkill, but to me, it's just due diligence. You need to know what you're getting into, whether it's a household appliance or a major life decision. This part of my personality wasn't a secret from Claire. She used to tease me about it. She called me her overthinker, but always in an affectionate way. She'd laugh when I'd map out our road trips with military precision, complete with scheduled stops and backup routes. She seemed to appreciate that side of me, the side that provided stability and planning. She saw it as my way of showing I cared, of making sure everything was always okay. And she was right. My logic wasn't about being cold or unfeeling. It was my mechanism for protecting the people and the things I loved. By ensuring the foundation was solid, I could relax and let my heart take over. Looking back, it's painfully ironic. My need for objective truth, the very trait she claimed to find endearing, would be the thing that ultimately brought everything crashing down. But at the time, standing on the cusp of what I thought was the next beautiful chapter of our lives, I saw no conflict. My heart and my head were in complete agreement. Claire was the one. Our 3-year relationship was the proof of concept. Our shared dreams were the business plan. And I was ready to make the biggest investment of my life. I had even started looking at engagement rings. Nothing too serious at first, just browsing online, getting a feel for styles and prices. It felt exciting, a little nerve-wracking, but overwhelmingly right. Every time I saw a ring, I thought she might like I'd picture her face as I slipped it on her finger. I imagined the joy, the happy tears, the beginning of our forever. I had it all planned out in my head, a quiet, personal proposal. Not some big public spectacle, but a moment that was just for us. Everything was aligned. The timing was right, our relationship was stronger than ever, and our future was a bright, shining path laid out right in front of us. We were happy, genuinely, deeply happy. I felt a sense of peace and certainty I'd never known before. It was the kind of calm that comes when you believe with every fiber of your being that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, with the person you're supposed to be with. The board was set. The pieces were in place, and I was ready to make my move. I was ready to ask Claire Cruz to be my wife. All I needed was that one final push, that one sign from the universe that this was the perfect moment to take the leap. And just a few days later, I thought I got it. But it wasn't a sign from the universe. It was a carefully constructed lie designed to exploit the very love and trust I held so dear. And it came in the form of a little plastic stick with 2 pink lines. It happened on a Tuesday, 8 days before my world split open. Tuesdays were our quiet nights, work gym, then home to cook something simple together. It was our comfortable, predictable routine, a small anchor in the chaos of the week. That night, I was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, listening to some low-key indie playlist, when I noticed the silence. It wasn't the usual companionable quiet we shared. This was a heavy, charged silence that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned around. She was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, just watching me. Her face was pale, and her hands were clasped so tightly in front of her that her knuckles were white. She was holding something small, a little plastic stick, but my brain didn't immediately register what it was. My first thought was that something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Claire, hey, what's up? You okay?" I put the knife down, my heart rate kicking up a notch. She didn't answer right away. She just took a slow, deliberate step into the kitchen, her eyes locked on mine. They were wide, a mixture of fear and something else I couldn't quite decipher. She slowly unclasped her hands and held out the object. That's when I saw it clearly, a home pregnancy test. And on its little digital screen, plain as day, was the word pregnant. The sound of the sizzling pan faded into a dull hum. My entire universe, which moments ago had been filled with the scent of garlic and ginger, suddenly contracted to that tiny screen. I stared at it, then at her face, then back at the test. The engineer in my brain, the logical part of me, tried to process the input, but it sputtered and died. "Is this real?" I managed to whisper. She gave a small, shaky nod as tears welled in her eyes. "I took it this morning," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't believe it. I took another one an hour later. Roman. They were both positive. She held up a second test from her pocket, identical to the first. My mind was reeling. Pregnant. We were pregnant. A baby. The words were like alien concepts. I reached out and took the test from her hand. It felt impossibly light for something that carried such monumental weight. Then the short circuit in my brain finally cleared, and a single overwhelming emotion flooded me, pure joy. A tidal wave of it crashed over me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. I looked at Claire, at her tear-streaked, anxious face, and I saw everything. A mother, her family, scraped knees and bedtime stories, late-night feedings, and lazy Sunday mornings. I saw the rest of my life, and it was more beautiful than anything I had ever dared to imagine. I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around her, lifting her off the ground and laughing. It was a wild, cathartic sound from a man whose entire world had just been fundamentally and beautifully rearranged. "We're going to be parents," I said into her shoulder. "Claire, we're going to have a baby." She was sobbing now, a release of tension. "I was so scared to tell you," she cried. "I didn't know how you'd react." I set her down gently and held her face in my hands. Scared. How could I be anything but ecstatic? This is the best news of my entire life, and I meant it. In that moment, 29-year-old Roman Moore, the man who created spreadsheets for buying toasters, felt a sense of purpose so profound it was almost spiritual. Every 5-year projection I had ever mapped out for my life suddenly seemed like childish scribbles next to this magnificent, undeniable reality. We abandoned the stir-fry and just sat on the couch holding each other, talking for hours. Claire told me about her week, about feeling a little off, more tired than usual. She'd missed her period but had brushed it off as stress. I absorbed every word. This was Claire, the woman I had loved for 3 years, the woman I was planning to marry. Her story was plausible, her emotions genuine. I saw her nervousness not as deception, but as the beautiful, terrifying vulnerability of a woman facing the biggest change of her life. I barely slept. I lay awake next to her, my mind a supernova of plans. A nursery. We'd have to convert the home office. I should start researching crib safety standards, car seats. I felt a fierce, primal wave of protectiveness wash over me. My logical brain had been given a new singular mission: protect them. Claire and our baby. The vague future plan of proposing suddenly became an immediate, urgent necessity. Looking back is a unique form of torture. I can see the subtle tells. I missed the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine, the tremor in her hand that I mistook for emotion. Her story was a script, a perfect performance, and I was the star audience member giving a standing ovation. But that night, 8 days before the end, I was just a man who believed he had been given the greatest gift in the universe. I fell asleep sometime before dawn, with a smile on my face, my hand resting on Claire's stomach, dreaming of a future built on sand. My meticulous planning brain had its next immediate step already calculated. The next morning, I wouldn't be researching cribs. I'd be buying an engagement ring. The next morning, 7 days before my life would be torn down to the studs, I was a man on a mission. The logic engine in my brain, which usually obsessed over market trends and retirement accounts, was now fully dedicated to a single glorious project: the proposal. I didn't want a grand public spectacle. This wasn't for an audience. This was a covenant. It had to be intimate, perfect, and for us alone. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, a decision that felt both reckless and absolutely necessary. I spent the morning at a jeweler my father had recommended, a quiet, old-world place where they treated every purchase with a sense of gravity. I didn't look for the biggest stone. I looked for the one that felt like her understated elegant, with a fire that only showed when the light hit it just right. That evening I didn't wait. I couldn't. I took Claire to the small park where we had our third date, the one where we both admitted this was something serious. Under a sprawling oak tree with the city lights twinkling in the distance, I got down on one knee. I told her that for 3 years she had been my home. I told her that the thought of building a family with her, of raising our child together, wasn't just a happy thought. It felt like my destiny. My voice cracked as I opened the small velvet box. She said yes, of course. Her tears were real this time, or at least they felt real. She threw her arms around me, and we were no longer just Roman and Claire. We were fiancés. We were a family in waiting. The next couple of days were a blur of champagne, happy phone calls to our parents, and endless, joyful planning. We were on top of the world, sketching out a life on napkins and dreaming out loud. But even in that whirlwind of emotion, my processor was still running in the background. A baby, a real living person, was depending on us. My instinct for planning for control kicked into high gear. Claire mentioned calling her regular doctor, but a small, persistent thought began to form in my mind. It wasn't suspicion, not yet. It was diligence. I'm the kind of person who gets 3 quotes for a car repair. I wanted the best for our child, and that meant starting with a clean slate. I wanted a top-tier medical team, an objective set of eyes who would guide us from the very beginning. So 2 days before everything ended, I told Claire I wanted to handle the first appointment. I framed it as a gift to her, a way to take the stress off her plate. "Let me find the best," I said. "A place that specializes in early-term prenatal care. We'll go together. This is my baby, too. I want to be involved in every single decision starting now." She seemed a little hesitant, maybe even surprised by my proactivity, but she agreed. She probably saw it as me being the responsible type A guy she knew. She had no idea it was the single most important decision I would ever make. I spent hours researching. I cross-referenced hospital affiliations, patient reviews, and doctor credentials. I finally landed on the Viridian Health Clinic. It was perfect. Highly rated, completely neutral, neither of us had ever set foot in the place. I booked an appointment with a senior obstetrician, a Dr. Alexander Parker. He had a sterling reputation, objective, thorough, no nonsense, exactly what I wanted. I marked the calendar, day 0, the day we would see our baby for the first time. The morning of the appointment, the air in the car was thick with a strange mix of excitement and nerves. I held Claire's hand, her palm a little sweaty. I was practically vibrating with anticipation. This was it. The moment it all became real. The moment we'd get a grainy black and white photo to stick on our fridge. The Viridian Health Clinic was sterile and modern, all glass and brushed steel. We filled out the paperwork, and I watched as Claire listed her last menstrual period, the date, just a few weeks ago. Everything seemed normal. We were just another happy, expectant couple in a sea of them. Finally, a nurse called her name, Claire Cruz. We were led into a quiet, softly lit room. A few minutes later, Dr. Alexander Parker walked in. He was about 45 with a calm, professional demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He shook our hands, smiled warmly, and asked a few standard questions. He had a kind face, but his eyes were sharp, analytical. "All right," he said, turning to Claire. "Let's start with a transvaginal ultrasound. It will give us the clearest possible picture this early on. We'll see if we can find the gestational sac and get a confirmation on the dating." I squeezed Claire's hand as the technician prepped the machine. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I stared at the monitor, a black void that held our entire future. The technician moved the probe, her eyes fixed on the screen. The silence in the room stretched, growing heavier with each passing second. I saw shapes, flickers, gray blurs, but nothing that looked like the pictures I'd seen online. Dr. Parker, who had been watching over the technician's shoulder, leaned in closer. His brow furrowed in concentration. He said nothing for a full minute, then 2. Claire's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel her starting to tremble. Can you see anything?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dr. Parker straightened up and looked at us, his professional smile gone. It was replaced by a neutral, unreadable expression. "I'm not seeing what I would expect to see for a pregnancy of this duration," he said, his voice even. "There is no visible gestational sac." The words didn't compute. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Is it just too early?" "It's possible," he conceded, "but unlikely based on the dates you provided. To be certain, I want to run a quantitative HCG blood test right now. It's the gold standard. It will give us a definitive answer by measuring the exact level of pregnancy hormone in your blood. The lab is just downstairs. We'll have the results in under an hour." The walk to the lab was the longest of my life. The bubble of joy we'd been living in had been punctured. Claire was pale and silent. I tried to reassure her and myself that it was probably just a mix-up with the dates, but the seed of doubt had been planted and it was growing with terrifying speed. We sat in a small private consultation room waiting for the doctor. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness. Claire wouldn't look at me. She just stared at her hands, twisting her new engagement ring around and around her finger. When Dr. Parker finally walked in, he wasn't smiling. He sat down opposite us and placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. He looked directly at me, then at Claire, and his gaze was one of profound clinical seriousness. "I have the results of your blood test, Claire," he began. "Your HCG level is less than 1. For a woman who is several weeks pregnant, we would expect to see a level in the thousands, if not tens of thousands." He paused, letting the weight of the numbers settle in the room. "To be clear," he continued, his voice leaving no room for interpretation, "you are not pregnant. Furthermore, based on these hormonal markers and the ultrasound, there are no signs that you have been pregnant recently." The world stopped. The air left my lungs. Not pregnant. The words echoed in the silent room, a death knell for a future that had never existed. I felt a strange cold calm wash over me as the emotional shock gave way to the brutal, icy clarity of logic. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. The home tests. Her nervousness that I'd mistaken for vulnerability. Her hesitation when I booked the appointment. It was all a lie. I turned my head slowly and looked at Claire. Her face had crumbled. She was staring at Dr. Parker, her mouth slightly open in disbelief, as if he'd just spoken in a foreign language. Then her eyes darted to me, and in them I saw it all. Not confusion, not sadness, guilt, pure, unadulterated panic. Dr. Parker, sensing the gravity of the moment, stood up. "I'll give you a few minutes," he said softly, and quietly exited the room, closing the door behind him. The silence he left behind was a physical thing. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. My voice, when I finally spoke, was terrifyingly steady. 3 years, Claire." I said the words like chips of ice. "We were together for 3 years. Rome and I don't understand." She stammered, tears now streaming down her face. The tests were positive." "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, they weren't. Or you manipulated them. Or you knew they were false. A doctor with a lab and a $100,000 machine just proved it. This isn't up for debate." I stood up and looked down at her. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had asked to be my wife just a week ago, was a complete stranger. This engagement, I said, my voice flat, was contingent on one thing: a baby. Our baby. The entire basis of my proposal was the family I thought we were starting. I held out my hand. The condition was fraudulent, therefore the contract is void. She stared at my open palm, confused. "The ring, Claire." Her face contorted in pain. "Roman, please don't do this." "The ring." I repeated, my voice harder now. "The proposal is retracted. The relationship is over. We are done." Sobbing, she fumbled with the ring, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely get it off. She finally pulled it free and dropped it into my hand. It felt cold and meaningless. I didn't say another word. I turned, walked to the door, and didn't look back. I could hear her calling my name, her voice rising in a desperate wail, but it was just noise. I walked out of the Viridian Health Clinic and into the bright, unforgiving sunlight. I walked past the other couples in the waiting room, some holding hands, some looking at sonogram pictures with blissful smiles. I felt nothing, just a vast, hollow emptiness where my future used to be. But as I kept walking away from the clinic, away from her, a different feeling began to surface. It wasn't joy, it was relief. The crushing, suffocating relief of a man who just escaped a burning building. I had been deceived, manipulated, and nearly trapped in a marriage built on the most profound lie imaginable. But my own nature, my need for certainty, for objective truth, had saved me. I had seized control of the narrative, taken it to an impartial judge, and received a verdict. The truth had set me free. My victory wasn't in hurting her. My victory was walking out of that clinic alone with my future, my real future still my own.